Summer nights with friends usually mean laughter, music, and the smell of smoke from a bonfire. That's what three college friends thought when they decided to have one last beach party before going back to campus. It was supposed to be nothing more than a memory to hold on to during the stressful semester ahead. The night was perfect. The air was warm but not humid. The waves rolled gently onto the sand, and the bonfire they built gave off that golden glow that makes everything feel safe. They cooked marshmallows, played music from someone's old Bluetooth speaker, and talked about the kind of things you only talk about when you're surrounded by firelight. Dreams, fears, and secrets you don't admit in daylight. But then the vibe shifted. It started subtly, almost too small to notice. The waves seemed quieter, the air felt heavier, and then one of them, Maya, froze mid-sentence. She pointed toward the far end of the beach. Just outside the reach of the firelight, a group of figures was standing. At first, the friends thought they were other beachgoers, maybe late-night walkers or campers. But the longer they looked, the stranger it became. These figures weren't moving, not talking, not shifting their weight, just standing, watching. "Hey!" one of the friends, Josh, shouted out. His voice echoed over the sand, carried by the wind. No reply. The figures didn't wave back. They didn't even flinch. The three tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was just shadows or a trick of the firelight. But when the flames began to shrink, casting weaker light, the figures suddenly started moving, not running, not rushing, slowly, deliberately. Step by step, they began walking toward the bonfire. Panic set in. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she thought the figures could probably hear it. The third friend, Eric, quickly kicked sand over the fire, smothering the flames. Sparks hissed out, plunging them into near darkness. With shaking hands, they grabbed their bags, the half-melted marshmallows, the speaker still buzzing with static, and sprinted toward the car parked at the edge of the dunes. They didn't stop until they slammed the car doors shut and locked them. The headlights flicked on, and Josh floored it, tires spitting sand behind them. As they sped off down the coastal road, Maya, still trembling, turned in her seat for one last glance at the beach. Her stomach dropped. The figures were still there, not running, not chasing, just standing exactly where the bonfire had been, their silhouettes illuminated faintly by the moonlight. And though the distance should have been too great, she swore every single one of them was facing directly toward the car. The friends didn't say much on the ride home. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they all felt it. A heaviness, like those figures hadn't stayed behind on the beach, like the memory of them had followed into the car. Later, Josh tried to convince himself it had been locals playing some kind of prank. Maybe just weird timing. Maybe campers wandering too close. But when they searched online the next day, looking for mentions of strange activity on that stretch of coastline, they found something else. Dozens of posts on old message boards, stories from years back, people describing the exact same thing, figures standing by the firelight, silent, watching, moving closer only when the flames died down. And in every story, the ending was always the same. Nobody ever saw their faces.
End of summer always comes with that bittersweet feeling. Classes start soon, vacations are over, and everyone is trying to squeeze in one last adventure before reality sets in again. For this group of teenagers, that one last adventure turned into something they'll never forget, and not in a good way. It started when they discovered an old, closed-down community pool on the edge of town. The place had been locked up for years, hidden behind a rusty chain-link fence that sagged in the middle. Rumor was that the city shut it down after budget cuts, but other kids whispered darker reasons. Accidents, drownings, shadows seen after dark. Whatever the truth was, the pool was abandoned, forgotten. But on that hot summer night, it was exactly what these teens were looking for, a forbidden thrill. They climbed the fence one by one, laughing as the metal rattled under their weight. The pool itself was a sad sight, water greenish and murky, thick with leaves, floating branches, and trash that had blown in over the years. The paint on the walls was cracked, and the faded no-diving signs were barely legible. The old lights around the edges had long since burned out, leaving only the moon and a few flickering street lamps in the distance. Still, the thought of a midnight swim was too tempting. One by one they kicked off their shoes and jumped in, the water slapping against the concrete walls. It was colder than they expected, and every movement stirred up clouds of dirt from the bottom. They splashed, laughed, shoved each other into the deep end. Their voices echoed unnaturally loud in the empty lot, bouncing off the walls like the pool itself was holding on to the sound. But then, it happened. One of the kids, Evan, suddenly stopped mid-laugh, his face draining of color. "Do you see that?" he whispered, pointing toward the far side of the pool. The others followed his gaze. At first, they thought it might have just been a ripple from their own splashing. But no, this was different. In the deep end, beneath the surface, something was moving. Something pale. A figure. It didn't look like another swimmer. It didn't even look like it belonged there. The shape drifted slowly, just beneath the surface, as if it were suspended in the water. Arms limp, body slack, and yet it was moving. The teens froze. Then in a burst of panic, they scrambled for the edge, pulling themselves out of the water as fast as they could. Their wet hands slipped on the rough cement, but adrenaline carried them over. In seconds, they were out, dripping, gasping, staring at the deep end. The water stilled. Nothing there, just dark ripples reflecting the moon. Heart pounding, Evan crouched and leaned over the side, his eyes straining to pierce the deep depths. "I swear I saw it," he muttered. His friends told him to stop, that maybe it was just a trick of the light, or a shadow, or even a big branch floating beneath the surface. But none of them wanted to admit that they had all seen the same thing. They grabbed their stuff and bolted. Nobody spoke until they were blocks away, still shivering despite the summer heat. Later that night, when they calmed down, one of the kids, Liam, was scrolling through his phone. He'd been recording a video when everything went down, but in the panic he accidentally hit burst mode, snapping dozens of rapid-fire photos instead. He said, "Guys, you need to see this." The group crowded around. The photos were blurry, streaked with water droplets, their own arms flailing as they scrambled out of the pool. But in two of the frames, clear as day, there was something else. A hand, pale, wet, clawing upward from the deep end of the pool, fingers stretched wide, reaching for the surface, reaching for them. No one ever went back to that pool. And when they told other kids at school, a few nodded like they already knew, like they'd heard the stories before, the whispers about a swimmer who never made it out, about how the pool had been closed down not because of money, but because something never left the water. And now the group knows one thing for sure. That old pool isn't empty. Not even close.
Every town has that one carnival that rolls in late summer, right before school starts. It's always the same. Flashing neon lights, the smell of fried dough in the air, cheap prizes you'll never use, and rides that look like they've been held together with duct tape and hope. For most people, it's pure nostalgia. But for one guy, a trip to the carnival turned into a memory he swears he'll never forget. He went with his cousin, just like they'd done every year since they were kids. They bought wristbands, stuffed themselves with funnel cakes and corn dogs, and rode every ride they could stomach. The tilt-a-whirl made them dizzy, the Ferris wheel gave them that quiet view of the whole town, and the Midway games emptied their wallets faster than they'd like to admit. Everything was exactly as it should have been, fun, loud, and harmless. But toward the end of the night, things changed. The cousins started wandering away from the crowds, past the bright rides and food stands, into the quieter end of the fairgrounds. It was strange. Back there, the lights seemed dimmer, and the music from the carnival rides didn't reach as clearly. The air felt colder, too, like the warmth of summer had stopped at the edge of the Midway. That's when they saw it. A tent. Old-fashioned, striped red and white, the fabric a little faded and sagging. A painted wooden sign out front read, "Fortunes Told, $5." They looked at each other, half amused, half curious. It seemed cheesy, but that was part of the fun. Maybe they'd get a laugh out of it. So they pushed the flap aside and stepped in. Inside, the tent was empty. No fortune teller, no crystal ball, no rugs or props. Just one old wooden chair, sitting in the middle of the space. The cousins exchanged a nervous laugh. Maybe they wandered in too early, or maybe the fortune teller had stepped away. But as they turned to leave, something happened. The flap closed on its own. The air shifted, growing colder in an instant. The cousins froze, and then they heard it. Right next to them, yet somehow everywhere at once. A whisper. "You shouldn't be here." The sound was soft, but it cut through them like ice. They didn't wait to find out what came next. Panic took over. They shoved at the flap, but it wouldn't open. Desperate, they tore through the side of the canvas, ripping it wide enough to squeeze through, and sprinted out into the night. Breathless, they didn't stop until they were back under the bright glow of the Midway lights. When they finally turned back to point out the tent, to prove to themselves it was really there, it was gone. The spot where they had seen the striped tent was now just open grass, empty and silent. No torn canvas, no wooden sign, nothing. The cousins swore they hadn't imagined it. They both remembered the same details: the old chair, the whisper, the way the air felt colder the second the flap closed. They even went back the next day in daylight, retracing their steps. But the far end of the carnival grounds was just that, an empty patch of grass. Here's the part that gives them chills to this day. When they asked around, older folks in town nodded knowingly. "Oh," they said, "you found the tent." The cousins pressed for more, but all they got were warnings. Stories about a fortune teller's tent that had appeared on and off for decades, always at the edge of the carnival, always vanishing after someone went inside. Nobody knew who or what was behind it. Some said it was a prank. Others whispered it was a curse. But one thing was always the same: the voice and the warning. You shouldn't be here.
A couple rented a lakeside cabin as their last getaway before work and school started again. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. Morning coffee on the porch while watching the mist roll off the lake, lazy swims in the cold water during the afternoon, and long nights by the fire with nothing but crickets and frogs filling the silence. It was quiet, peaceful, and everything they thought they needed before reality pulled them back. The first night was perfect. They cooked a simple dinner, laughed about old memories, and watched the stars until the fire turned to embers. It felt like something out of a postcard. No phones buzzing, no traffic, no neighbors, just them and the endless stillness of the lake. But the second night, something changed. Around 2 in the morning, the girlfriend shook her boyfriend awake. Her hands were trembling, her breathing uneven. At first, he thought she had a bad dream, but when she spoke, her words sent a chill through him. She said she had déjà vu. She had seen this exact moment before. The cabin, the bed, her boyfriend wearing the same shirt, and in her déjà vu, there had been someone standing outside the window. He tried to calm her down, brushing it off as just nerves or an overactive imagination, but she wouldn't let it go. Her voice was insistent, almost desperate. She swore she knew what came next. Someone would be there. To prove her wrong, he got up. He walked across the creaking wooden floor, grabbed the curtain, and yanked it open. And froze. Because she had been right. In the pale glow of moonlight reflecting off the lake, a figure was standing at the tree line, not moving, not stepping forward, just standing there, facing the cabin, watching. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The boyfriend's hand tightened on the curtain. The girlfriend whispered his name, her voice cracking. The figure didn't flinch, it didn't call out, it didn't leave. It just existed, as though it had been waiting. The boyfriend pulled the curtain shut so fast it rattled the window pane. Panic surged through them both. They debated what to do, confront it, call for help, or just ignore it and hope it left. But something about the way the figure stood there, silent and patient, made them feel like time was running out. They didn't wait to see what would happen next. The girlfriend grabbed their bags, tossing clothes in without folding. The boyfriend snatched the keys from the table, his hands shaking. Within minutes, they had piled everything into the car. As they sped down the gravel road, headlights cutting through the darkness, the girlfriend looked back one last time. The cabin was barely visible between the trees, but she swore she saw it again. The same figure, only now it was closer to the porch. They drove through the night, not stopping until they reached a motel hours away. Both of them sat awake until sunrise, too shaken to sleep, replaying what they had seen. The next morning, the boyfriend suggested maybe it had been a camper or someone passing through the woods, something ordinary, something explainable. But the girlfriend shook her head. She said no, this wasn't random.
Her déjà vu hadn't just been a dream, it had been a warning, a moment she had already lived once before. And in that memory, just before she woke up, the figure had started walking closer. They canceled the rest of the trip, drove straight home, and to this day, neither of them will book another rental in the woods. They don't talk about it much, but when they do, they always circle back to the same haunting question. What would have happened if they hadn't left when they did?
Our final story happened to a college student heading back to campus after summer break. The drive was long, hours of nothing but dark highway, the hum of tires on asphalt, and the low glow of dashboard lights. He kept the radio on for company, but static bled through the speakers more often than music. It was the kind of road trip that felt endless, where time blurred and every mile looked the same. By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., he was deep into that lonely stretch of road where the world feels deserted. No headlights in the rearview mirror, no cars ahead, just him, the dark tree line, and the occasional reflector flashing back as he passed. That's when it hit him. A sudden, crushing wave of déjà vu, not the casual kind where you think, oh, this feels familiar. No, this was different, heavy, overwhelming, like a reel of film unspooling in his head, replaying a moment he knew hadn't happened yet. The same dashboard lights, the same buzzing static on the radio, the exact stretch of asphalt under his wheels. And then, certainty. He knew what was coming next. His chest tightened, hands gripping the wheel harder. He couldn't explain why, but his gut screamed at him to slow down. Almost against his own logic, he eased his foot onto the brake, letting the car roll down to a crawl. The road ahead looked empty, harmless. But just seconds later, it happened. A deer burst from the trees and sprinted across the lane. Its body caught in the headlights, eyes glowing for a split second before vanishing into the other side of the woods. If he hadn't slowed down, he would have hit it head-on. The impact could have wrecked the car or worse. His breath caught in his throat, his pulse hammered. He pulled the car to the shoulder, hands trembling as he tried to steady his breathing. The silence of the night pressed in harder than ever. Even the static from the radio felt eerie now, like white noise masking something else. And then the realization hit him like ice water. He had dreamed this before. Months earlier, back in spring, before summer even started, he remembered waking up in a cold sweat from a dream about driving down a lonely highway. The same dashboard glow, the same static-filled radio, the same deer sprinting across the road. At the time, he brushed it off as just another weird dream. But sitting there, on the shoulder, headlights still burning into the empty blacktop, he couldn't brush it off anymore. It didn't feel like coincidence. It didn't feel like chance. It felt like a warning. For a long moment, he sat there, staring into the trees where the deer had vanished, wondering what it meant, wondering if something, some force he couldn't name, had nudged him to remember that dream at exactly the right moment. When he finally merged back onto the highway, his grip on the wheel was iron tight. Every mile after that felt charged, like he was moving through a world where the edges of time had frayed, where past and future overlapped in strange ways. He made it back to campus before sunrise, exhausted but safe. Yet he couldn't shake the question echoing in his head. What if déjà vu isn't just a glitch in the brain? What if it's survival?
An instinct we don't understand, reaching across time to keep us alive. And if that's true, then how many of us have ignored those warnings without realizing what we were risking? So after all these stories, let me ask you, would you still look at the end of summer as just another season? Or does it feel more like the perfect time for something dark to slip in? Before you go, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share your own creepy stories in the comments or by email. That way you won't miss the next video. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because here, every season has its own horror.